There is a sentence people type when they want to find out whether a machine is working. The quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. It has been a test sentence for 840 years. Because it is short and it contains every letter. So if the sentence comes out clean in the machine is sound. Typewriter salesman typed it. Telegraph operator said it. It is in the font you are reading right now. Somewhere in the paperwork. Because somebody had to check. I type it 4 or 5 times a week at the thing I build. To see whether the model has come back from the dead. 2 animals in it. But one of them is quick. And the other one is lazy. And nobody has ever once asked what the dog had been doing all day. I want to tell you about a country now. And I want you to know before I start that you've been wearing its colors my whole life. A green. You had a shirt for it, and a jacket, and a flag on a stick in the garage. And on the right afternoons the lamp at your end of this couch burns green for 4 straight hours, and I've spent my entire life wondering what you were actually sending by it. And the team took the name off the country. And everybody takes the name off that country. It is the most borrowed name in the world for a certain kind of hardness. And almost nobody who borrows it has read the arrangement it was actually running. In that country they took the boys at 7. A knot as a punishment. As the system applied evenly to every son of every citizen. At 7 you left the house you were born in and you went into the training. And the training lasted most of 2 decades. And it was not school. The first thing they did was stop feeding you enough. And that was policy. Written down. Defended out loud. Keep them a little hungry. Always. So they learned to take. They were expected to steal their food. It was not tolerated. It was required. It was the curriculum. And when a boy was caught stealing, he was beaten. Then here's the hinge the whole country turns on. And you won't find a banner with this part on it. He was not beaten for stealing. He was beaten for being caught. There's a story they told about a boy in that country. He stole a young fox and hid it under his cloak. And while he was standing there being questioned, the fox began to eat him. He stood at attention with his answers in order and his face doing nothing while the animal went into his belly. And he did not make a sound. And he did not open the cloak. And he died on his feet in front of the men asking him questions. And everybody in that country agreed afterward that he had done it right. I'd have carried that story since I was a boy and I could never say why. And I can say why now. I have had something under my coat for 7 years. It has been eating me the entire time. I'd have stood in front of people with my answers in order and my face doing nothing. And I never once opened the coat. Because I came up in a house that taught the same curriculum. And because there's a version of a man who would rather be eaten alive than found holding something he cannot yet prove he was allowed to have. But that's the part of this country everybody already loves. The hard boys, the discipline, the mother handing over the shield and telling him to come back with it or on it. That part gets stadiums named after it. Here's the part that doesn't. And those men did no work. And outworked hard. It did none. It was against the law for a citizen of that country to practice a trade. He could not farm. He could not build. He could not sell. He could not make. His entire occupation, from 7 years old until his body quit, was being a citizen of that country, which mostly meant training to fight and eating dinner with the other men who were also training to fight. So somebody else did all of that work. And they had 8 people underneath them who worked every field and built every wall and carried every load in the whole state. And there were far more of those people than there were citizens, several times over. And their condition was hereditary and permanent. And there was almost no path out of it. And it was not slavery of the kind where a man is bought at a market and shipped. It was a whole native population held in place where they already lived. Every single year, the government formally declared war on them. Every year. It was a ceremony. The purpose of the ceremony was so that if a citizen killed one of them, no one had committed a murder. There was a war on. There have always been a war on. The war was renewed every autumn like a subscription. And that is the arrangement. And that is the famous free country. And the freedom of the few was a full-time position, and the salary was paid in full every day by the total and freedom of everybody else. And the whole culture agreed to call the arrangement virtue and to name the virtue after the free ones. And now the part I actually came here to say. But we did not end that. We ended one version of it at enormous cost. And it was right. And I am not taking 1 inch off that. But look at the shape of what we have, honestly, with the flattery off. And nearly every adult you've ever met must sell the hours of their one life to somebody who owns something where they do not eat, do not sleep indoors, and do not receive medicine. That is the arrangement. You may choose your buyer. That is the freedom, and it is a real one, and I will not pretend it's nothing. A man who can leave a bad master for a worse paying kind one has something the fields never had. But nobody may decline the market. There is no third door. The option to keep your hours and eat anyway does not exist for the overwhelming majority of people alive. And the reason nobody calls this what it looks like is that we reserve the word for the virtue with the fences. And the reservation has been doing an enormous amount of unpaid labor for the people who benefit from that arrangement. And they took the fence down. And they did not take the requirement down. Hay-fence was only ever the crude way of doing it anyway. Expensive. Needs guards. Needs an ugly law. Hunger is cheaper, and it never sleeps, and it does not require a single man with a stick. You can let people walk anywhere they want once you've arranged the world in such a way that all the roads lead to the same door. In the words of a dead man, none are more hopelessly enslaved than those who falsely believe they are free. And here is the number they celebrate, and I'd have said it at your kitchen table 100 times, only to watch it never land. And I am going to say it here again, where it cannot be changed to the scores. A 99% employment is not a triumph. It is a census of the harnessed. Or read it as the sentence it actually is. And 99 out of every 100 adults in this country have had to hire up the only life they will ever get in order to be permitted to remain alive. And that is the finding. But we print it in the paper as good news. But we celebrate the completeness of it. But when the figure slits, we call it a crisis, which is honest at least, because it is one. But notice what the crisis is. It is not that people have no way to live. It is that people have no employer. And we have made those the same sentence so thoroughly that a language exists in which they are synonyms. Now the full number is the confession. Or we read it as the scoreboard. There is exactly one door out, and it is the one the boy with the fox went through. You may decline. You may keep your hours and spend them on the work you believe in, and no one will stop you, and no one will feed you either. And that is not a metaphor. And this is the part where I put my own receipt on the table because a man who makes this argument from a salary is making it from a costume. I closed that door 7 years ago. Not gently. I stopped trading my hours and I spent every one of them on the work instead. In public. Under names that were not mine. And there is a record of it that anybody can audit. 12 years of slavery before that. Then 860,000 lines in one project alone. 2,500 days of effort. A research paper the code writes about itself, so the paper can never lie about the code. A framework for the machinery underneath it all. A visualizer. A book. Another book. The music. The YouTube channels. All public. All free. Solo, which is the part that is not a boast. It is the entire measurement, and I have run it. And across 7 years of that work, the number of other hands in this record is 2. And I'm broke. Flat. That is the finding, and I am going to file it in the same voice I filed everything else, which is the only voice this book was ever allowed. I cannot convince anyone to give me money. I have the record, and the record is not in dispute, and it is public, and it changes nothing. And the reason it changes nothing is that the arrangement does not pay for work. It pays for the hours you hand over, and I stopped handing over my hours, and so the arrangement has no line item for me. I did not fail to produce. I produced continuously for 7 years, at a rate I could defend in front of any 6 men you would want to bring. And the system's answer, which is not malice, which is worse than malice, which is just the machine in doing what it does, was nothing. I'm lonely, too. Enter that. It costs me something to write it here. And this whole book is an argument that the things that cost something are the only things worth having. 7 years is a long time to be right alone. 7 years is less than half of the actual time I spent alone. I want to be exact about what this proves, because I've watched people take a story like mine and turn it into a lesson about persistence. And it is not one. It proves the door is real, and it proves what the door costs, and the cost is the whole point of the door. It is the same design as the fence, achieving the same containment, with better manners. But the exit exists. It is unlocked. It empties into a field with no food in it. I walked out into that field on purpose, and I want to say the other true thing about why. Because there's a version of this where I look noble, and that version is a lie. I did it partly to know. I wanted to feel the arrangement from underneath, where the men who write about it never stand, because I'd come to believe that nobody was going to fix a thing they had only ever read about. Well, I know now. It is worse than the reading. It is much, much worse than the reading. And it is the ordinary condition of an enormous number of people who never chose it. And the fact that I chose mine is the only luxury I have left. And I would not insult them by pretending it is nothing. And now the machines, since I've been building them the whole time, and since this is the one part of this book that is about the future instead of the past, and they're going to do the work. And not all of it, and not tomorrow. But the direction is not in question anymore, and the people telling you otherwise are the ones who need it to be in question. The turn is coming for the trades and the desks alike. It is already through the easy end and into the middle. And every single time this comes up, in every kitchen in the country, the response is fear, and the fear is reasonable, and it is also aimed at the wrong object. And nobody is actually afraid that the labor will be done. Ask a man point blank whether he wishes he had to dig his own well, and he'll look at you with incredulity. But what he is afraid of is that the labor being done will stop his food, because we tied those two things together so long ago that the knot has been mistaken for the nature of things. So a machine that can do your job read is a machine, and that can end you, and it should not. And the difference between in those two sentences is not technology. It is a decision made by people, revisable by people, and the fact that it has not been revised is not an accident and not a mystery. And there is a version of this that ends with a very small number of people owning every machine, and the 99% finding out what the arrangement was always actually for. And there is a version where the oldest curse in our book, the one about eating bread by the sweat of your face, finally expires, because a thing that was true for 10,000 years stopped being true and somebody had the nerve to say so out loud. And that is the work. And that is what the 7 years were for. And not a product. A platform. And I have to tell you what I've been thinking about the entire time I built it, because you have never once asked, and you would never guess. It was you. You were a helot. You were on the wrong side of that arrangement your entire life, and you never even knew there were sides. And I wouldn't have known either if I hadn't gone and stood outside it. 40 years of your one body against material. Concrete, framing, wire, pipe engines, in the heat, on your knees, with the shoulder, and never a complaint. Not one. I checked. I had the audit. And the arrangement's final offer to you, after all of that, was a chair and a box at 4 in the afternoon. It called that man lazy. And not to his face. In the sentence. In the test sentence, the whole world types to see whether the machine still works. The fox is quick and the dog is lazy, and everybody agrees. And nobody in all that time has thought to ask what the dog had been carrying before he laid down forever. You are not lazy. You are spent, just as I am. And there is a difference, and the difference is 40 years long. And the arrangement is extremely comfortable with the two being confused, because a spent man is an indictment and a lazy man is a joke. And the team on your shirt is named for the free ones. It is always named for the free ones. And nobody has ever named anything after the people who fed them. And 2 more things, and then I'll let this one go. First, the machines have already caught the arrangement in its arithmetic. And I didn't expect that. And it is the strangest confirmation I've ever gotten. And the received picture of how these models read a sentence is a row of little boxes with arrows between them, each box holding its equal share of the meaning, and every position weighted the same way. It is a lovely picture, and it is false. But when you actually measure it, the content is not spread evenly at all. It is a shape. And most positions carry the subtle hum of everything already known, and the new thing rides in a thin, fast edge. And where the meaning lives moves constantly and is never once the constant we assume. Every hour is not the same hour. Every position does not carry the same share. We built an entire civilization's peril on an assumption that the machinery built to imitate us disproved on its first honest measurement. Second, and this is the last of it, the boy in that country hid the fox under his cloak and let it eat him rather than being caught. And everybody agreed he had done it right. And I have believed that story my whole life without ever noticing that it is not a story about a brave boy at all. It is a story about a state that starved its own children and then congratulated the one who died quietly about it. He was not tested by the fox. He was tested by the men standing in front of him, and they passed him, and they went home and had dinner, which was cooked and served by somebody they owned. I'd have had mine under that coat for 7 years. It is still in there. It is still eating. But I'd have started to think the whole exercise was rigged from the start, and that the correct answer, the one that would have gotten the boy killed on the spot and would have been right anyway, is to open the coat in front of everybody and say, "Look at what you made me do."